Good evening. Respected Professor R. Ramaswamy, Professor Gautam Mandal, Honorable Vice Chancellor Sir, all speakers of the conclave, and all participants, I, Mrs. Gauri Gothiurekar, welcome you all for the 18th annual lecture on informatics. To begin the session, I request all to raise for the Somaya campus prayer. Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate Om Ishavasya sarvam Yatkincha Jagatyam Jagat Tena Tyaktena Bhunjitha Ma Vrudah Kasya Siddhanam Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langhayate Girim Yat Krupatamaham Vande Paramananda Madhavam Om Prano Devi Saraswati Vaje Bhirvajinivati Dhinam Avitravatu Om Chodayitri Sundrutanam Chetanti Sumatinam Yajnam Dadhe Saraswati Om Asatoma Sadgamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amrutam Gamaya Om Sahanavavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai Sarvetra Sukhinas Santu Sarve Santu Niramayah Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kashchid Dukhamapnuyat Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you. Now I request the dignitaries to proceed to the dais. Professor R. Ramaswamy, Professor Gautam Mandal, Honorable Vice Chancellor Sir, and N.V. Satyanarayana. Thank you. I invite Mr. N.V. Satyanarayana, Chairman and Managing Director of Informatics, for the welcome address. Over to you, sir.
Good evening, friends. You have had a very long day today, which continues for a while more. I welcome you all for a distinct function of the day, our 18th Informatics Annual Lecture, which we used to organize as an independent function. Post starting our Library Technology Conclave, we have made this part of this event, a distinct part of this event. I'm happy to invite you all, and I'm happy that you are able to make it your time to continue even after a long hour of spending time here. And this particular Informatics Annual Lecture is something very unusual, which makes us even happier. We have three distinguished scientists on the dais with us. each very distinct, highly accomplished in their academic and research career. I welcome all the three of them. Professor Ramakrishna Ramaswamy, who is going to deliver our annual lecture today, the 18th one in a series, and Professor Gautam Mandal, who is presiding over the meeting, and Professor Pillai, whom all of you know, the Vice Chancellor of this university here. I welcome you all, sir. I particularly would like to thank Professor Pillai for hosting this lecture here on behalf of Informatics. Informatics founded this lecture series as in memory of our decennial celebration in 1990 when we completed 10 years. The first lecture was delivered by two distinguished speakers at the time, one from the industry and one from the academia, research and the government. The person, very distinguished person, Dr. Sheshgiri, who was then the Director General of NIC, and he has a connect with the two speakers of the day. He was also working in TIFR in those, I guess he started almost his career in TIFR. To introduce you to this lecture series and the distinguished lecture speakers who spoke in this lecture series, I request my colleague to run a 2.5 minutes video. Thank you. Let me take a few minutes to introduce our distinguished speaker of the day. Professor Ramaswamy, as I said, is an outstanding scientist, researcher, and an academician. As usual, he has many papers to his credit, and I may say tons of citations. I think these are the scientists who have surpassed that. He is a Princeton scholar who did his PhD in Princeton after his master's degree in chemistry from IIT Kanpur. Returning from Princeton, he joined at TIFR as a fellow and then moved to JNU, where he had a long innings as a distinguished professor. And he was also the Vice Chancellor of Central University of Hyderabad. And now currently he works in Delhi University as a visiting professor. And what is interesting about him is, starting from chemistry, like outstanding scientists of the day, he is highly multidisciplinary in his research interests and programs, specializing in nonlinear sciences, statistical physics, and now computational biology. He worked with the Nobel laureate Rudolf Marcus in California Institute of Technology. And what I personally know about him, which I often read, his blog, is he's a voracious reader and a prolific writer with a wonderful style and substance in his writing. When I are covering all aspects of life and science, bringing a scientific spirit into his writing. And as I keep reading often his blog post, and then, the blog post name is "And Then," all of you would find it very interesting to read. I tend to think that he's a great philosopher too. Thank you, Ram, for accepting our invitation and agreeing to deliver this lecture series, which I was particularly looking forward to, and I'm sure every one of us here. And presiding this program today is yet another Princeton scholar. He did his postdoctoral research in Princeton, and back in TIFR, he is the chairperson of Center for Theoretical Studies in TIFR, and he's also a fellow of INSA and Indian Academy of Sciences. And he has interest in popular science writing too. I noticed a couple of his writings in Indian Express, etc. Thank you, Professor Gautam Mandal, for agreeing to preside our 18th annual lecture series. And happier I am because Professor Pillai delivered our one of our annual lecture series. I remember it's the 11th one when he was in Delhi at that time. And I'm so happy that we are organizing this event in his institute, in his university, which is hosting this program today. Once again, I thank you all for joining us for this program.
Thank you, sir. Now I request Honorable VC, sir, to launch the product Remote Log Mobile version established by Informatics.
Before he gets ready, let me welcome Professor Ramaswamy and Professor Mandal to Somaya Vidyagara University campus. Professor Ramaswamy, of course, I'm also a chemist organic chemist. I know him for the last 32 years directly, and of course indirectly even before that. Mandal, of course, I have seen some of your papers, but let me, on behalf of the university, welcome to our midst. Of course, if it were a working day, this campus would have been full with students and all that. But I was watching the whole program through through online. Large number of participants are there. Let me welcome and let me wish. I look forward to further visits for both of you to our campus. Thank you very much. Okay, then I am happy to launch this. What is it?
Remote access software.
Mobile remote access software of informatics. Of course, it had an earlier version. This is one. It's a mobile version of it. Thank you. Where should I touch? Okay. All the best.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sir, would you like to brief about it?
Yeah, just a word about remote log. We were the first in India to launch a remote access software almost about 10 years ago to promote the idea of people using their digital library resources worldwide through their library system, which that used to be a global software called Easy Proxy. 3 years ago, we decided that we must have a local software. That is when we started developing. And we developed the software, and last year it was launched in our LTC 2021 conclave. And we came out with a mobile version this year, which is launched here. And once again, I thank Professor Pillai for launching this. And as in this particular event, thank you all.
Thank you, VC sir, for launching the product, and thank you, Satya sir, for briefing about it. We are fortunate to have Professor R. Ramaswamy for delivering the 18th annual lecture on informatics. The topic is Scholarship Unbound, Flattening the Uneven Access Landscape. I invite him for the same. Over to you, sir.
Okay. Okay. Is there a, I don't have, okay, fine. Good evening, everybody. Professor Pillai, Professor Mandal, my good friend, Mr. Satyanarayana, Professor Shalini. Thank you for this invitation to come here and talk about something of interest to the informatics community and also of great interest to me. A word before I start, this uneven access landscape is the very uneven opportunities we have to information, to knowledge across the world, and particularly in India. During the lockdown period of the last 2 years, I think many of us realized that while we may be one country, one size solution does not fit all, and it's a very, very uneven landscape. So, oops. All right. Okay. Now, the topic of this conference is all about libraries and knowledge management, and I'll talk mainly about scientific scholarship, because that is something that I know a little about, and describe what the major issues are in the that have to do with unbinding scholarship. Right. Now, science as an enterprise, in some sense, you date it back only to the middle 1600s. And one of the things that defines this as an enterprise is the appearance of a journal, of a scientific journal. And here is an image of the first journal. This was started by the Royal Society in the Philosophical Transactions of the Royal Society. And this is an audience which knows that the journal is still being published and will still accept contributions and so on. But the journal started as a means of communication between scholars to give some account of the present undertakings, current research, studies and labors of the ingenious, so bright people, in many considerable parts of the world. In principle, really, this hasn't changed in the years since then. Closer home, in 1934, Sir C.V. Raman started the Indian Academy of Sciences in Bangalore, and one of the first activities of the Indian Academy was to publish 2 journals, the Proceedings of the Indian Academy of Sciences, Part A and B. Unlike the Royal Society's journal, these are still not in operation, but they have transformed into other journals, and today the Academy publishes 12 journals, and all of these grew out, or most of these grew out of the Proceedings. And this has generally been true for all scholarly societies. The publication of papers, communication of results, and so on. Now, this has been our scientific tradition, and arguably it's also the scholarly tradition, so that encompasses the humanities and social sciences as well. We would like to publish valid, verifiable results in scientific journals, and this is how we communicate with one another. Tell me what you've done, and I'll tell you what I've done. And we also would like to transmit knowledge through the generations, because it's incremental. Every little bit of progress is incremental. As Newton famously said, he has seen farther because he stood on the shoulders of giants, and that's how things happen. In addition, I would say that it is necessary to publish the results of scientific investigation or of any kind of scholarly inquiry, not only to make your efforts known to a wider body and to the public at large, but I would say that if your work has been funded by a public institution, this is also your obligation. This is encapsulated in something called the Access Principle by John Wilinski, in a book which is not very widely known, but it's also not unknown. It came out in 2006. And the access principle is more or less very simply just this. If you are committed to doing scholarly work, and in some sense people are paying you to do that, to have fun at their expense. This commitment to scholarly work carries a responsibility, and this responsibility is that you must circulate your work as widely as possible. It's a very simple thing to say, but it sort of defines the so-called access principle. You must make your work accessible. Having done research, it's important to write it, publish it, and to the extent possible, make sure that others can read it. But access has always been a very complicated matter. It has been difficult right from the beginning, and from the time when the first journals were published, access has been a very tricky issue. The language, it means, most of the journals are in English or in some other European language. There's some small exceptions, nothing very significant, which basically means that 90% of humanity can't access it just by the language in terms of what it's written. In the old days, the medium was the printed journal, so unless you had a copy of the journal, you typically couldn't read it. Given the fact that I can see Gautam over here, I remember the early days in TIFR where we would, if not hungrily wait for the journals to arrive, we would certainly wait for the next issue to come before you had it. And you can imagine that if this was the case in the 1980s, what it might have been in the intervening years between the 1600s and the 1980s. Things just didn't get around. And the third thing was distribution, and this is where your tribe comes in largely, the librarians. Getting material across in different places was not always easy. Not just the case of the mail didn't arrive, but the fact is that people didn't have a lot of money. So you didn't get access to all the journals. It was a problem. And subscriptions, exchanges between corresponding societies, etc. This was one way in which people did things, but it wasn't always a very useful way. It wasn't a very equitable way in which access could be ensured. Nevertheless, this is how things were. I'm aware that there are limitations for transmission of scholarly ideas in the social sciences as well. And there, I would say translation has been crucial. And it continues to be very crucial because stuff that is, or material that is not available in languages other than English, simply don't reach the required audience. And here's a very famous example by Gayatri's. Derrida's grammatology was translated and made available to a Western audience by an Indian scholar. There's a little irony over here that at least I find amusing. Now, of course, times have changed. And as we are all aware, deeply so, there have been radical changes in the production, in the distribution, and the archiving of scholarly literature since starting somewhere around the middle 1970s. So within the lifetime of most of us, we've seen how all these modes of production of information and its transmission have radically changed. And it's been catalyzed by the development of computational media, by the digital media in terms of storage and so on. So a lot of science has gone into this. And this has also highlighted the very unequal levels of access to scholarship across the world. Very simply put, most major sites of knowledge production are situated in the global north. So in the Western countries, in Europe, in Japan, and so on. And of course, China should be included there now. While sites of consumption, which is largely us, are distributed across the world. So inequality in access to knowledge has had a profound consequence on economic development, especially in the face of globalization. So if you don't have access to knowledge and if you don't have scholarship, your society is very poorly developed and you just don't make it. This was said nicely by a Cameroonian scholar whose work is available today because thanks to the internet, but writing in the Journal of the Cameroonian Academy of Sciences. No, I did search for an out there example. Mr. Titanji says, the acquisition of science and technology is a critical determinant of the development status of countries. Those countries that have excelled in science and technology are the most developed, while those with a weak scientific and technological base are the least developed. This is not very profound, and people have said this many, many times. I could have shown you a graph of GDP versus the scientific achievements of people and the number of scientists and all the usual stuff. But somehow Mr. Titanji's very simple statement in the Cameroonian Journal has a certain resonance. At the same time, over the last few decades, there have been many initiatives that have radically altered the manner in which scholarly literature has been disseminated, both locally and globally. Archive is a very popular and deservedly so website, and an effort and an idea and a philosophy. This was founded by Paul Ginsberg in 1991, partly in response to Spenta Vadia, who happens to be Gautam Mandal's PhD supervisor. It's there in the New York Times if you'd like to read about the origins of how archive came to be in its present incarnation. People used to exchange papers via email. Email, you may recall, was only invented in 1980 something. At least when I left TIFR in 1986, email was not common. But people would exchange papers on email, and it used to clog up your inbox. So in order to address this issue, Ginsberg made a server where you could go in and put your papers there, and everybody could download them, and this was archive. Today, there is something like, there are well over 2 million scholarly articles in the fields of physics, mathematics, computer science, etc., etc. There are similar efforts in chemistry and biology, social sciences, medicine, and mathematics, computer science. I mean, every branch of science does have its own archive, which keeps preprints of all articles. Now, it's important that material is not peer-reviewed on this site, but this is just something where you can, if you are a legitimate scientist, or if you're logged on into that site, you can go and put your stuff out there. Some people have wondered whether the preprint itself is the future of science, and there's an article on archive on that, so you can read that. Okay. Another such effort is the Electronic Journal Delivery System, or the EJDS. And this was catalyzed by many people, including Professor Hilda Cerdeira, who is shown there. She happened to be visiting Mongolia at some point in time, and discovered that while there was a lot of support for everything from drinking water to whatever else, there was very little support for the hard sciences. And there were a large number of very competent scientists working in Mongolia who didn't have access to the literature, who didn't have really almost anything but a great interest. So when she went back to Trieste, she worked with the donation program of the ICTP to address this problem of restricted access, low bandwidth, and what was very familiar in our country, power cuts. So the EJDS is a program of the ICTP. It is an electronic journals delivery tool, and anybody can just log in there, make an account, and ask for any particular article that you would want. And if you're working in a developing country in the global south, you will have access to this. It's still useful today. I mean, it may not, talking on a campus which is completely Wi-Fi and 5G and whatever, one doesn't always remember that Malawi doesn't have all these, and there are parts of Cameroon, as it happens, I have a sort of a student over there who, they're not able to answer email in time because, the last time it was because there was a war and somebody had been kidnapped and so on. Okay, so these kinds of methods are still useful. The World Academy of Sciences, TWAS, has been very sensitive to the differential access that countries have, and the fact that it makes them less participatory in the scientific enterprise. There's a belief that if you have a little, more science, you can do better for the people in your country. So there are ways in which organizations like TWAS try to help people to get articles, but this addresses only a small fraction of the real problems that academics in less endowed places face. And then there are organizations such as INASP, an international network for advancing science and policy, and what they try to do is at the level of negotiating with publishers, right, and across disciplines to provide researchers, libraries, with the books that they need at affordable prices. Now, these are complicated matters, but all across these various efforts, the message is the same, that only an equitable knowledge ecosystem, this is just taken from their website, where all the talent that can be unleashed to address the problems that humanity faces, that we are going to actually solve something. Let's remember that it is a Swedish schoolgirl who reminded us about the urgency of global warming, all right? And a Pakistani schoolgirl who told us that it's important for women to be educated and allowed the freedom to go to school. So the solutions to tomorrow's problems are going to come, they will come from unexpected sources because our expected sources are on yachts or buying up Twitter or something like that. Okay, now, so the view from below. The credo of most scientists is this: work, finish, publish. It's the motto of Michael Faraday, great man. But if this is the individual scientist's credo, this begs the question, should scholarly publications be absolutely freely available, or should they only reach those who have the funds to pay for subscriptions to the journals where these articles are published? Right? Now, there are many opinions on this question, but because of the internet, it's ubiquitous. And as we sit over here, everyone has got their cell phones out and their laptops out, and you've got 1 year on this, or maybe no years on this, and you've got divided attention everywhere. And they can hardly fault anybody because I do the same, right? Okay. But the point is that it requires us to think a little about this issue, because this is really leading to more inequality in the world. In India, where we are and are talking, almost all research that is done is publicly funded through the government of India, through its various ministries, or by other public funds. Okay, so there's very little private research in our country in percentage terms. Now, shouldn't everybody have access to this? True, we should have, all should have the benefits of this, and we do try. It's easy to give examples that rage around the pandemic, because so many institutions have had public funding, and you want to know, we've poured in so many crores of rupees into this university or that institute of virology or immunology, where's the vaccine? And people are justly asking for stuff, but let's remember that the scientific article has become the only way in which that science is systematically communicated or presented externally. So the individual scientist wants to publish in very high quality and high impact journals. Because this translates into visibility and thereafter to funding, fame, and fortune. It's very common to hear people say, oh, you know, so-and-so had a Nature paper. What did he write about? Or what did she write about? I don't know, but it was in Nature. Now, the place where the article has appeared overcomes everything else. Sometimes it's good, right? But more often than not, it sort of basically, okay, so I've said it over there, journals are just the gatekeepers of our prestige. It's not even important what you do. Where you have published that is your prestige. I mean, and I am aware of the fact that we are the sum total of all the places that we have been at. I am very proud of the fact that I taught at JNU for so many years. Of course, I'm very frequently called a tukde person. But no, you see, the point is that the place carries you and you carry the place. But if your entire scientific prestige is where you have published rather than what you have done, I think that we've come down to a, okay, I mean, the point is that we really, we need to be a little smarter than this. Now, if the point is that even if we created a new method of sharing our research, if the government had a channel, a TV channel where all the latest research was told to everybody and everyone could just dial into it, we would still want journals because we would like to archive them, we would like to go on, and importantly, I think that we would like to have peer validation because that's one thing that journals do provide is at least one or two people in the world other than yourself have read your paper thoroughly or should have read your paper thoroughly and should have validated it. Now, all the high prestige journals originate almost exclusively from the global north. Science, Nature, Cell, etc., etc. It's going to be a long day, or rather a very cold day in July before you'll find that a high prestige journal is coming out of Lesotho or Madagascar, I don't know, from India. It's highly unlikely. This is a hugely profitable enterprise that profits from our individual vanity and, I believe, our community laxity. Because we, as a community of scholars, not the community of librarians, so no, but as a community of scholars, we are impressed by this business of prestige coming from the journal. Now, we are told this frequently, but it's good to remember that academic publishing is dominated by a few very successful players. And there's a consortia between funding agencies, publishing consortia. There's a nexus between funding agencies, publishing consortia, evaluatory bodies. Publishing metrics are employed as a proxy for academic quality. So you want to know what somebody's H index is. And then you would like to know what is the impact factor of the journal, right? My students routinely tell me, sir, we have to go for a high impact factor journal. This one is no good, we can't do this. So, I mean, these are all circular arguments. Now, this also drives up the cost of production, publication, subscription, and effectively the cost of science. Michael Eisen, who started the Public Library of Science, or PLOS, he actually said this publishing business is perverse and needless. And of course, PLOS has also gone the way of everybody else. There is something about the human spirit that we have to worry about. Okay, so the big four are Elsevier, Springer Nature, OUP, and Taylor Francis, and these dominate the scientific publishing landscape. Elsevier manages 2,500 or more journals, earning billions of dollars in revenue with profit margins that make Jeff Bezos pull out all his non-existent hair. Okay, I wish Elon Musk would try to buy some of this. Now, Springer Nature is a name which is, of course, familiar to everybody, but they co-publish a number of academic society journals in India, including the journals of the Indian Academy of Sciences, and I was the editor of publications at some point in time. I've seen them operate. I have also seen a shark in an aquarium. They brook almost no competition. They just, it's a revenue sharing model, and as I will show you later on, it's a very profitable revenue sharing model. But a lot of academic publications in India, not just the Indian Academy of Sciences, Indian National Science Academy, the National Academy of Science of India, the Indian Journals of X, Y, Z, they have just gone in and systematically made linkages with everybody, and they co-publish. Why, you ask? Well, I'll tell you the kind of money they make. Something that I learned in preparing for this talk is that this was not always the case. This is a fairly recent phenomenon that happened post-World War II. Because then science became much more professional. The governments in different countries emerged as major patrons of scientific endeavor. And through things like the US National Science Foundation, the ESPRC, or its predecessors in the UK, and so on, they started funding research and the rapidly expanding university system, because all this happened post-World War II. Publishers like Robert Maxwell, and who is he, you may ask? Well, I don't know, people have forgotten, but he used to own the Guardian and died under mysterious circumstances in the 1990s. He saw an opportunity. He bought up Pergamon and expanded Pergamon Press through beautiful publications in very high production quality and so on and so forth. And he took it to great heights and financial success and sold it to Elsevier in 1991. And then Elsevier suddenly became a 1,000 journal strong company, and then it became the world's, and it went by consolidating such activities, it became the world's largest academic publisher. Where this impacts us is that our obsession with trying to break Indian universities into the top 1,000 or top 100 or something like that. Perpetually everybody keeps on saying, oh, there is no Indian university in the top 100 and whatnot. The only way in which we feel we can get into those top 100 lists is by publications. And this is a thing that Elsevier and, all the big four, they all know it very well, that there is a constant rush by university administrators to, to get into these journals, because this will then feed into the rankings and so on and so forth. Even in India, this whole pressure to get into these higher rankings has had a sort of a severe effect on our research enterprise. I'll mention that a little more. To publish one paper in Nature is over 5 lakhs. I'd rather not publish in Nature. Give me the 5 lakhs. I'll, have I don't know, be able to do a little more research. This is the actual cost. But if you go to any university, I don't know, Professor Pillai will agree with me or not, but if your faculty member comes and says, I can either publish in Nature for 5 lakhs, or I can publish in, I don't know, Current Science free, even then one would be torn. Because, you can't buy that prestige. It is something that, well, it's a cause. This can skew our priorities, right? So where do we spend our money? What research do we do? All this is sort of fueled by the competition between the big four for your papers and for your money. That's what the big four are constantly fighting for. Even in our, without all this sort of somewhat cynical view of this enterprise, the scientific reward system in our country and everywhere has to go by certain metrics. You're not just going to give something to someone for good behavior. You do need to recognize contributions, and one way in which people recognize contributions is, as Satya mentioned, citations, number of papers, where your papers were. These are not bad things to look at. How you, instead of citations, what one is really seeing is that how useful is what you have done? How useful to the community has it been? Where have you, how much have you contributed over the years, etc. All these are there, but those are now just encapsulated into metrics like, number of this and H index and whatnot. And scientists can, like anybody else, we have our own weak points, and we can align to any particular objective. You put the target as having a certain requirement, we can do that. All of us are capable of modifying our behavior in order to achieve something. But the reward system encourages, in a sense, it encourages some slightly negative kind of a behavior. See, for example, if half the clinical trials that are carried out in the US are not even published in a journal, this means that, the clinical trials are important. People are not going to, put their lives on the line for something which is not important. But this is not good enough to get into a particular journal. Why? Because it's not fashionable. You've got your clinical trial on some tropical disease that nobody cares about, like malaria or something. In the US, in the US, I'm saying, so it doesn't get into a journal, and if it's not in Lancet, you're not going to read it. You see the, and even over here in the last 2 years, we've seen the clinical trials for Covaxin are still not published. Because, the data is not either collected well enough, or it's not going to get into a very high-profile journal, so you say, all right, we are not publishing it. Now, what is the point of all this research? I don't know, if the only thing is visibility and, prestige, right? Okay. Now, one of the things that happens in journal publications is that, this is a very, Maxwell and people like him realize that this is a great, easy game. Because scientists produce the work, you send it to an editor who is usually working for a pittance or contributing free. They will send it to a referee who will referee the article for free and send it back to the journal, which will then put it all together and communicate to the author, get it validated. Then they will say that please typeset it, proofread it, do everything, and then send it back to the journal, which will then publish it. This happens even today. As of now, I still have 3 articles that I'm supposed to referee, which I haven't yet sent the reports back. But I'm not going to get a rupee for it, so Actually, I'm not going to get $1 for it because these have come from the US, but you know that's how it is. So the Deutsche Bank called this a bizarre triple pay system in which the state funds the research, pays the salary of the people who are checking the quality of the research, and then buys the published. Now, I started by writing what would we lose if it were all made free, and then I was just thinking that it's not what we would lose, what would we gain if it would all just become free? And that's really the idea of the open access model. Now, open access, as you all know, emerged in the 2000s as a way of publishing stuff with the Public Library of Science in a formal way. This has undergone severe changes over the years. But maybe I'll come back to this later on. Even though it seems an in principle good idea, the big four have gotten into it, because if you can have an entirely open journal, even then people don't go there. People will still go to vanity journals, so you can make people pay to make your articles in vanity journals free. So again, this is just, you know, it's a way of people making a lot of money. One of the more worrisome things is the so-called Plan S, where governments will now support research bodies which will then demand that you publish in open access journals, and then they will pay the journals directly. And of course, they're not going to increase the money they're going to give to research, so effectively your research money will go down. So there are, you know, various alternatives. You know, in addition to Plan S, you have the DEAL project in Germany, and so on and so forth. Right? The simplest one of just putting your stuff on a server and allowing it to be just accessed by everybody, like the archive, doesn't seem to capture the imagination of everybody, because even after you put it on archive, you still want to go and publish it, but that may change. Today, I mean, and this whole business of, you know, open access and whatnot has given rise to a whole bunch of predatory journals, and I'm sure many of you would have received letters like this. I just put it there because it came to me today. And I am, you know, fondly referred to as dear author. Good day to me. I had expected a reply from you. Oh my God, we're getting intimate over here. But I know you have been busy. The person does know a lot about me, so no intention to disturb you, but wanted to send you a polite reminder regarding your paper submission to our journal. If it's feasible for you to collaborate, please submit, etc., etc. And this is the Open Access Journal of Biomedical Science. I mean, this is just a copy of that letter that came, and it did come today. All right? So Jessica Williams, I do not know who she is, but no, I'm sure you would have got one. I mean, each one of us gets a letter like this, you know, I mean, with this, you know, if it's not from Jessica, it's from Monica or something, you know, you know, and, you know, women professors would probably get something from Rob or Ron or something like that, you know. Very clever. All right. I have a personal experience with open access and the academic journals, which have been co-published with Springer for the last 15 years or so, which something that most of you do not know, is that we entered into this agreement with Springer with the following proviso, that every article would be available for free on our website. So the Academy has a website where the article is completely free, and exactly the same article is published on the Springer web version of the journal. Right? That's behind a paywall. the Academy version is free. There's a very small difference between, there's a little bit of value add that Springer does, or actually that we do for Springer, which then goes on, which is not there on our website. All right? But the number, what it has done, and what Springer does is to then take these articles and put them in packages and send them, when people subscribe, they subscribe to the entire package of physics or chemistry or what have you. The journal impact factors have gone up over the years, and that's a good thing in general. That means that more people are seeing our journals, which they were not earlier. Many more people actually access the articles by paying for it, even though there's exactly the same article that's available for free on our website. Okay? This is an example of what I have called digital colonization. Namely, we go to these Western sites and we believe what's there over and above what's there available on our own websites. That's one example of colonialism, which carries over into this digital age. But it's also the fact that Springer has got just a lot more research going on how to get your Google page rankings better. So we, as professionals, have not bothered to invest in this part of it, which is to see how to get your work done, work sort of displayed in a more visible manner. What does Springer get out of our co-publishing with us? For these 12 journals, the terms that we have, it's not like 100% profits to Springer. There's some sharing of profits, but on our Academy journals, 12 journals alone, Springer makes $1 million every year, more. And just profits are more than $1 million every year. Okay, so my real, now for my talk. That was just the introduction. No, all right. So the bulk of what the way forward, Sci-Hub, LibGen, and the new Alexandria. All right. So these are, as you will, I think most of you know these websites. This is where you can get all journal articles, a variety of books, and then there's a site where you have all sorts of both books and journals. All right. Right. Now, in 2011, Alexandra Albakian, she launched the website in Kazakhstan as an openly communist project to break the market of big publishers. Right? She's unashamed and unabashed about this. Now, more than 500,000 people use it every day. It's an indispensable research resource, not only in poorer countries, but all over the world. I know people at the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research who use it. Right? I use it. I hope there are people over here who use it also. Right? Even if journals can be accessed through the university library, you can only use them directly if you're on campus most of the time. And local restriction is a problem, so, okay, now, these are, this is the things that you learn when you agree to give a talk. There is a tradition to this kind of activity, and I think that just to call her a pirate or to call, or to say this is illegal is, I think, it's intellectually very shallow, because there has been a long tradition of protest and dissidence in the erstwhile Soviet Union, where they would share their results, they would share a lot of material which was censored and forbidden, etc. They would sort of, reproduce this by hand. I've taken this out of Wikipedia, so, it's sort of well known. It is just that it wasn't well known to me, right? So this practice of manual reproduction and then sharing this material, which was quote-unquote forbidden, has a tradition in the former Soviet Union, of which Kazakhstan was a part. All right. Now, why this is important and why I'm talking about it is that there was a case filed against Sci-Hub in Delhi High Court by American Chemical Society, Elsevier, and WWII, who said that their site infringes their copyright and asked the court to block internet service providers in India. All the internet service providers should block these sites. And so no Indian should have, or nobody working from India should have access directly to these sites. All right. It has been done officially in various countries, including Russia, I'm told, Germany, France, Sweden, England, etc., etc. And Alexandra has been taken to court everywhere in the world, including the US, where she's ordered to pay several $1 million to Elsevier, which is a joke. But for the first time, Sci-Hub went to defend the case in court, arguing that in India, copyright is not applicable when material is required for science and education. Now, some of you may remember the case that Delhi University against OUP, the Xerox, big one? Yeah, the Ramanujam and all those things that were connected. All right, so and this case is going on. It hasn't been decided yet, but Alexandra, and they've had some, well, this is a little. So a group of academics have sought to intervene in the case, and I'm part of that group, right? On behalf of the defendants. So we say that Elsevier, we are against Elsevier, WWII, etc. They should not be allowed to block our access to Sci-Hub. Not by our, we say that we represent the bulk of all academics in India, and that we are speaking on behalf of all of you to say that we should have free and open access. We are only intervening in the case. We are neither Alexandra nor are we Elsevier, so we are not parties of either the first or the second part, but we are just saying that, look, we would like to say that it is in the Indian public's interest that access should continue. Whether this will be allowed or not is yet to be seen, but our aim is to show that access to sites like Sci-Hub are in the general public interest, and the Delhi High Court appears to agree. All right. I mean, there are various points, like any typical, anybody who's interested, I can show you the legal arguments and this sort of large papers. But what we want to say is that the copyright that we've all signed over to these big four and other publishing agencies, they didn't earn it really. I mean, they got it because we had no option to sign copyrights, but it didn't help to advance creativity, or it doesn't help to advance scientific research. Actually, when an article is available on Sci-Hub, it increases its visibility because a lot more people have access to it. All right. All right. Now, Sci-Hub doesn't have a site in India. And so when Elsevier comes and says that Indian service providers should stop us accessing a site in Kazakhstan, I mean, it's laughable. Go and fight them in Kazakhstan if you have so much money and so much clout. Go fight people at the source. Don't fight them in my backyard. All right? See, for example, and this is actually counterproductive because so many things were made free and easily accessible, and when during the pandemic, Sci-Hub was almost the only way in which you could access a lot of articles. And there was a boom in that was the only kind of scientific activity that people could do. So, the argument that this is somehow, this is not like Rahul Dev Burman stealing, Sergio Mendez's songs and, passing it off as his own, or there are younger people who do that. I forget the name of these, but you know, Bollywood is filled with all these cheap copies of Western music or, you know, film ideas or what have you. This keeps happening all the time. But, you know, just giving people access to scientific literature is not in the same category as, you know, making you know, so there are arguments that you can think of. Okay, I just wanted to show you that these are from the pleadings of the case. What the application for intervention is presented by 20 scientists, many from TIFR, math science, and like I said, I'm also there. We feel that you know, that there are serious consequences for the Indian science and research community. And there is a public interest in this particular case, to which Elsevier has said that, you know, Sci-Hub is outrageous. They say that, you know, that they are pirates and so on, and LibGen is actually teaching others as to how to, you know, how to violate copyright. We ignore copyright because it's not applicable to information, especially in digital form, etc. And that copyright is an unfair way of making money for publishers. So, you know, so their argument is to say that they also turn around and say that we don't represent Indian science, that we, you know, we are not representative of the Indian public, and so on and so forth. But that's par for the course. Winning this case could have significant disruptive consequences for the scientific publishing system. It could make the case of all these of the big four and all the other science publishers somewhat weak. I would be very happy to see more models like the Indian Academy of Sciences, where there are free versions and whatever other versions that are available. You know, it's not that you don't, I mean, publishers do add something, but nothing that merits them getting 50% profits. Okay, so I think that people do value the process of publication, but bring something more to the table. When you bring so little to the table, don't take 50% profits, all right? In a sense, the, you know, the system is in fact somewhat broken. And it needs to change. And to me, one of the things that really needs to change is us. Because if we don't spend the kind of effort that's required to value scholarship, to how to assess things in a real manner, you know, I mean, it's just so much easier. You tell me what's your H index here, and I'll find out, is your H index bigger than his H index, or is it, you know, please. This is the, you know, this is such a lazy way of trying to do anything. Covishield got, you know, so much percentage, this one got so much other percentage, this is better. Arey Baba, I mean, there is a lot more complexity to it. I mean, okay. And so, Alexandra's, I mean, it's an interesting quote. It's naive and dangerous to expect science to thrive when information exchange is hindered. Science should not be controlled. You see, what I've tried to show you is that it's not just the publishing of science that is controlled by these corporations, the kind of science that is done, the way in which we do science, and who we determine will, you know, look at us in what way. All this is controlled by these big corporations, and it should not be controlled in this way. This is detrimental to us. But it's useful for us to keep a few things in mind. That our collective need for access to literature and this uneven access landscape that I've talked about is not just, you know, it goes well beyond the Delhi High Court and this one case that we are talking about, all right? And it also goes beyond the efforts of individuals like Alexandra Elbakyan. We cannot make her the person on whose shoulder we are shooting from. Reliance on her courage and her resilience in the face of multiple lawsuits and real physical danger, it would not be prudent. I mean, if I may make an unwise political analogy, I mean, you cannot expect Zelensky to protect us or protect the rest of the world for democracy. It's just not a wise strategy. Speaking of India, our solutions have to be local and need to recognize the requirements of our diverse country with its hierarchy of access issues. You know, I have had students during the lockdown who don't have 5G because they live in Kashmir. I've had students who cannot get onto the internet and attend classes because the internet is just, the access issue is very difficult in rural Bihar or Chhattisgarh. And there are other such issues that we have to address, and we must recognize that, I mean, the first step is access. After that is what you build on it. The one country, one subscription models have been talked about, but these really need to be translated into reality. And again, I will just close by saying that we need to have our own solutions. It's very nice that Elbakian came up and said that there is Sci-Hub. If one day she says, I'm tired, I just want to close shop, and she just shuts off her servers, is that the end of Indian scholarship? Because now we have begun to rely on it so much. And that's one of the reasons one is fighting this case, not just to make sure that we can access her websites, but that we realize that it's important for us to have access to knowledge. I've drawn on sources from all over, and rather than give a precise list of references, I just thought I'd mention some of these. And with that, let me thank you for your attention. There doesn't have to be a Q&A.
Any questions? Please give mic to Shalini ma'am. She wants to say something.
Ram, I have actually two kind of questions. I say kind because one is not exactly related to what you're talking about in the sense of global north, global south. But in general, when you talk about this kind of a totem pole, right? You have this top rank, you have this, etc., that exists within any system for that matter, including India. Okay? What I mean by that is, supposing you think of an alternative, such as, let us say, even the preprint server or anything of that kind, where things are being, or even a, let us say, institutional repository. What I have found is, there is this north-south within. Let us say somebody from IIT or somebody's article is there. So they will read it. If it is there in the University of Mysore's website, people will not read it. So in a way, a journal which is, which doesn't have this institutional thing, well, if I get my article published in Nature, a University of Mysore article is the same as IIT article, let's say for that matter. So that, what I'm saying is a larger issue where you have these rankings, you have this totem pole issues which cannot be avoided. Number one. Number two, what are your solutions for this kind of a uneven, I would say, playing field in general?
See, the question of hierarchy is always present, and in a country like ours, we invented it, right? We've got our caste system to worry about on everything that we do. And what you've described is really that kind of hierarchical organization that happens in any kind of structure. I'm not saying that this can solve everything, but you know, the purpose of my sort of presentation over here was really to talk about generally allowing people to read what is available or to have access to each other's information, all right? I agree with you that journals do have an important role to play, and I acknowledged as such. That it's not that I'm saying let's do away with journals, because an important part of archive is that it is not peer reviewed and it is not validated. And we are increasingly going to have to suffer some of that, especially when the world's richest man buys, see, I'm sorry. I do believe that this acquisition of Twitter will have consequences for science, because you know, this is how now scientific facts are going to be publicized. There are very important things that journals can provide, all right? But unless we talk about how they should provide it, how the peer review system needs to be modified, I'm not even saying don't have journals. I'm just saying don't make it so expensive to access it. That's all one is really saying. I do agree that in a journal, you know, all, you know, Rajdeep Sardesai's famous, you know, phrase, "Hamam mein sab nange hain, to nature mein sab equal hai," you know. So that is also true, that a journal is an equalizer because it allegedly looks at certain kinds of values, all right? I'm certainly not implying that journals play no role in that aspect of things.
Good evening, sir. This is Vishwanath from Indian Statistical Institute. You know, I really enjoyed your talk, because what exactly you said, yeah, that's what I think many of us sitting here, I think, talking in the same manner. But when I go back to my institute, you know, if you don't publish to a particular journal, no, yeah, I mean, and our promotion, basically, you know, that when we become, because I'm still associate professor, so I have to still, you know, cross one more level to professor, and then probably if I dream for HIG, higher academic, some HAG, higher academic grade, that's again different, which is not so easy, I know. So the problem for me, like, you know, when my student comes or when I write, I do research and publish, you know, it's always those things pop up, you know, suddenly comes to our mind that, okay, if we don't publish in this journal, then maybe my promotion would be in a, you know, problematic situation. So that's really a real practical issue. And I feel, I mean, so the idea is that, again, that who created this kind of hypo, you know, like that, okay, this is grade A, this is grade B. Conference also, we don't, you know, consider the conferences just because they don't fall in that grade A or grade B like that, right? So this is something, so what is your thought? Because you also, you know, previously you headed, you know, institute like Central University of Hyderabad, again, that's a very prestigious institute, then you were in JNU and all. So what would be your take, what you think about it, that how we can, you know, overcome this problem, right? So these scientists, like, you know, they feel free to publish wherever they want. Okay, they should not be, you know, constrained with something. That is one question. The second question, I always wonder, even, you know, Indian journals, you pointed that also, you know, because that prestige is very important as a scientist. You know, if I publish in an IEEE journal or in Nature, of course it brings me some prestige. It gives me more visibility than publishing in some Indian journal. So now the question is, again, you know, what is your thought about that? Why Indian journals are lagging behind this, you know, so-called the westernized, I know, US based or Europe, mostly they are there, right? So where actually we are lacking, so that our journals is not reaching into that level, so that we feel very proudly to send our paper there to get it published. Yeah, so these are the two, I mean, questions, very basics, but yeah.
Thank you, and these are not easy to answer at all. No, because, I mean, it's easy to talk about the problems like, you know, the roads are not good and there are potholes and stuff, but it's much more difficult to go there and repair it. Okay, this business of the the lack of prestige or lack of perceived prestige is a serious one. Some of it, I think, I mean, it's easy to blame the British for everything, but oh yeah, I mean, it's just easy to blame them for everything, including the fact that I have to speak in English. No, I think that there is something that a colonial history does to us, and that is we don't believe in ourselves. I've actually written about it in my blog, and because I am concerned that, that we don't even respect the best of what we do. When I showed you the proceedings of the Indian Academy of Sciences, the first paper, page 1, number 1, volume 1, is C.V. Raman, Sir C.V. Raman, and yet very few of us would even, I used to try to insist to my students that we should publish in Indian journals, and they would then say that in that case I prefer to work with someone else. No, no, they don't do that, but it is a problem, and it is something that this is one of the things that I said is community laxity. As a community, we don't sit and say that, look, it is possible. There are groups that will sit around and say we will not publish in an Elsevier journal. It doesn't matter whether it is Cell or Nature or what. If it is published by Elsevier, we will not publish there. There are communities that sit and do that. All right? But it requires a certain kind of collective, collective working. And I agree, it's easy for me to say, I retired 3 years ago, और क्या promotion लेना है? असलियत में hack बन जाएगा. So there is no, so it's easy for me to talk, and I do realize the pressures at your age and stage. But I think that without a certain kind of engagement with this problem, if not today, it will have to get solved, because if the journal system gets broken, and there are indications that in some subjects the journal system is breaking, then we are going to have to figure out a more equitable way of respecting each other. Not just that you published there and I published here, but that you did this work and I did that work. I'm making a plea for it, but I do realize, and I will be lying if I said that there's an easy way to solve it. There is no easy way. It requires community engagement.
I have a question related to that taking back up academic publishing to the scholarly societies. So is it happening in the Western countries, or only that is the distant dream?
I mean, I would say that it is a distant dream, because because one thing that we must realize is that 90% of the scientists who have existed since the beginning of time are alive today. The numbers of people coming into science has really ramped up. I mein, this is also true that, something like 80 or 85% of people who have been alive, of humans who have been alive, are alive today. It's just the way of population growth. But because of the very large numbers of scientists, academic societies are no longer able to cope with the volume of work that is coming up. Right, like I said, it's not as if I have an easy solution and say that do this and then you will also be rewarded, my son. That is not how it works over here. I think that what I'm appealing to is that we are equal participants in knowledge production, knowledge curation, and its advancement. We are equal participants, and we are not acting like equals. We are only acting like consumers.
Thank you, sir. Just I wanted to ask one question about, there are many open archives are available they are now in the libraries. Thanks to the NAC, because now they have asked for the, some libraries has to go for the printed journals like that. My question is that now for librarians now, and the researchers also now, because subscribing e-resources is a costly, very costly. This, and then now Sindhu, they are having the controlling the price and other things. My just want to advice for the librarians now, how they will do this, cope up with this open archives and their quality. Because the more and more research scholars, they are depending upon the open archives instead of going for the e-resources subscribed to the libraries. Then how do you advise to us how we have to survive in the profession and how we have to guide to the researchers? Thank you, sir.
I mean, I can't give you advice on
No,
this, but
my question is that open archives are more and more.
No, I would say that, look, one of the things that you should do, and I'm appealing to your Vice Chancellor on your behalf, you have to ramp up the amount of technical support that we all need to. The investment that we as a scholarly community make on these kinds of ancillary issues is very minimal. We need to increase the amount of, it's not just that get better servers and what have you. We need to get better professionals out there in order to actually make good product. I mean, I think that, you know, it's something for us to all think about. Which is the country with the biggest number of IT professionals in the world? India. Which is the city with the largest number of, IT professionals? Bangalore, Hyderabad, Pune, you name it, we've got it all that. Who made Sci-Hub? A postdoc from Kazakhstan. She didn't even have a job. She was a postdoc and she did it in her spare time. Now, it's not a, it's again easy for me to say because I didn't do it either. But because there was a certain mentality, a certain way of thinking, but the actual technical requirement was not that much. And I am actually concerned that tomorrow, if Elsevier gets an injunction against Elbankian to say that, close down, go and bomb Kazakhstan or whatever, supposing that it does happen. I mean, if her servers had been in Lviv or in Kiev, it'd be gone by now. Then where would you be? We don't have alternatives. We are not thinking, it solved a problem for us, so apna jugaad ho gaya. But we do not have a plan B. And this is what I'm trying to say. We need to have a plan B. So unless we invest a little in it, Professor Pillai.
As a result, what has happened, you mentioned work, what is it, work, finish and publish. Somewhere there was now what is happening as because of this form filling exercise, of course I was in NAC, I was in UGC also. So because of this form filling exercise, what is happening is actually people are publishing in quotation and finishing themselves, perishing themselves. Earlier we used to say publish and perish, but now there are, of course, that aspect has not been covered in any of our discussions. But if you just look at, you said largest number of IT professionals in the country, largest number of fake journals also in this country. Largest number of fake journals, of course, even our current science has a So it is, of course, when we were all, getting into academics and all that, there was no requirement of a publication number or anything to get, and probably with one publication or even without publication, people have become very eminent people got promoted. So this, of course, that's controversy is till now there. Some organization, some government organizations saying that these are the journals and these are the numbers. And if you have this number, you get, different grades. Of course, I am not familiar with the grades now. So this has really really killed the very spirit of independent inquiry and then maybe scholarship publishing. Another point, of course, this has nothing to do with those questions, but if you just look at these big journals, whether you are mentioning with LCB or all these corporate publishers, but the academy, all the academies are in the editorial boards. All the academies are in the editorial boards. So that's also there. That is.
I mean, it's like Lady Macbeth, you know, the blood will never go from our hands.
So we cannot wash off our hands from the.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a question. My name is Madan. I'm here. This is about the academy journals and its revenue. Now, academy is also sharing some revenue from the publishers. And you say the optimization in terms of, web optimization, they are far superior. Academy side, you don't have that interest or you don't have time to do all that thing. Now we are getting revenues. So it is our duty to increase the visibility of open access content in different search engines, Web of Science, Scopus, Google Scholar, and so on. And you have to make sure Springer is not making enormous money out of it. So this responsibility now goes to academy now, because this is unethical for certain people who are not able to understand that this particular content is available online free are penalized here. So in that way, what is the name sharing of the Springer Academy? In what way academy has benefited out of this sharing in terms of are we getting some seminal contributions because of this Springer visibility?
I mean, I actually agree with you, but there are problems because of the way in which our government works. The academy is funded in part or mostly funded by the Department of Science and Technology, so we become liable to all the various rules and regulations of the government, all right? So that's actually what has made it very difficult to, if I should go there and say that I will now hire some 14 CEOs who will do whatever, etc., it's not possible. But I mean, but your point is well taken, and I have on various occasions tried to alert our people to this kind of problem, that we need to do a little better ourselves. And you're right, I mean, we are not doing the best that we can. We don't make $1 million every year, by the way, all right? If we did have, we have a smaller fraction of contributions from there.
The other acceptance that I have is that the problem is with us. But with us, because by killing the publishers or making them out of business, the us problem is not solved. Even the publishers are allowing, in a cruel way, you can post your final referee draft on your website, which will not take even a few keystrokes that for your tweets or your blogs or something. You can just put your postprints on your website. This is not happening. This is a complete inertia.
I did say that there is, laziness on our part.
Yeah. So what is the role of academies here to break that inertia, because you are mobilizing the community frequently? So that's what is my question.
These are problems which are very difficult to solve, because the academy tried to make a repository of fellows' publications. That is such an incomplete repository, it's not even funny. But also the academies are a very small fraction of Indian science, right? The problems are there at every level. Universities don't have good repositories, people don't have good web pages, they don't archive. Somehow we are not taking our whole participation in this enterprise seriously. That's why, just now I said that, look, we must remember that we are equals. And, if we don't have that mentality, then what does one do?
Thank you.
So I want to go back, though, to the point someone else raised earlier, which is not only is it not doing the extra work, but we, as academics, are choosing to go with a certain hierarchy of journals. And as an example, I'm an editor of a journal. A few years ago, we became ISI rated. Yay. Our submissions, I think, tripled, if not quadrupled, because in many parts of the world, being ISI rated is a proxy for quality. And so many people want to submit to us who didn't submit earlier. And part of that is because in their internal evaluations, a publication in an ISI rated journal counts and publication elsewhere doesn't count. And so it's really that shorthand in evaluation, I think, that's driving a lot of it. As you said, you have a paper in Nature, doesn't matter what it's about, it's Nature. We have outsourced evaluation of our faculty to the journals. So what would it take for people to take that back? Well, it would make evaluating faculty way more time consuming because you would have to actually read all of their papers and make up your mind what you thought. I really think it's that laziness that you said, that we've reduced faculty evaluations to checklists, but we have so many faculty to evaluate, what else can you do?
I mean, yeah, and we are not really differing in principle in the sense that we do realize that this is a problem. It's a problem of growth. It is also a problem of our, our attention spans are getting somewhat shorter, right? And this whole enterprise is taken in, life just moves a little faster. So there are no easy solutions, but I do see that we cannot always outsource our evaluation of quality to some ISI rating or whatever other rating that impact factor.
Hello. Myself, Dr. Sarika Sawant from SNDT Women's University. As our discussion is going on about journal publication, I would like to highlight here one point that I came across, that Australian Research Council, they rejected 32 applications for the fellowship that they provide before pandemic, okay? And after pandemic, they realized that, not only that Australian agency realized, but entire world witnessed that what is the importance of preprints archiving in case of medical sciences, that how it proved to be so important and valid for the researcher's life. So after this pandemic, they took the U-turn, means 32 applications were rejected, and then they asked these 32 fellows to appear for the interviews. And what was the reason for the rejection was that they had archived their papers in preprints. Their journal publications was less and preprints archiving was more, and that is why their applications were rejected. But after the pandemic, they asked these 32 people to appear for the interview. So I think this COVID has taught us that even the open science, what we are talking about, that this COVID has realized us that the importance of preprints and how now that has to be considered by the higher bodies like UGC, that we should not only focus on journal publication, but also archiving of our papers. Thank you.
I did cite that paper on archive which says that our preprints, the way for the future, it may well be, but we'll have to come up with some slightly better way of peer review. Open peer reviews and stuff. This already happens in many journals, but it's something that will have to become the norm. The less said about what UGC should or shouldn't do, the better, because they will suddenly have a common, I don't know, some common something or the other.
I have a question to you. Rather, I have two questions. First question is, you made two pertinent points. One is you mentioned about, you said peer review is a must. Peer review validation is a must. Fine. You also made another point. Copyright is an area where scientists are, have no option. They have to give away the copyright. Now, the peer review, these two factors together, the necessity of peer review and giving away copyright are leading to one important factor, that's branding. So you are forced to give away copyright for branding purpose, which is further enriched by peer review process. Now, this branding is what you also mentioned leads to prestige. Prestige is something, you know, you made a famous statement. I forgot that. Yeah, journals operate, you know, they keep, yeah, the scientists' prestige, okay. Now, the question is, the branding is a costly exercise. Since the branding is a costly exercise, which is a product of these two factors, giving away copyright and need for what you call peer review, you have created a situation, you as a scientific community, author community, have created a situation for the need for branding through factors like H-index, whatever else. Now, as long as you want branding, somebody has to publish to help you. So if you are paying more money, you are paying for sharing the brand.
Satya,
And are you willing to sacrifice branding?
Look, many of us do. Gautam will tell you, and you know, I can sort of anticipate the gist of what he said is that the community that he belongs to don't believe in journals much. They believe a lot in exchanging information via preprints. Now, I'm not saying that journals don't do anything. We are talking about, and for the bulk of scientists, it is not an option. You know, whether it is for promotion or whether it is for, you know, accreditation and so on, we do need certain standard places where things appear. We do need standard validation patterns. All that one is pointing out is that the kind of profits and the kind of paywalls and the kind of, you know, of stuff that the big four publishers and others do is getting less and less acceptable.
I understand that, but as long as the branding factor...
Look, let's, you know, who contributed to the brand of Nature? Scientists. Macmillan did very little other than bring it out every week.
It happens with ACS also?
With ACS, with every journal, including the Academy journals, you know, Proceedings of the Royal Society, of the Indian Academy, anything. The actual contributors to the prestige are the scientists, who then, you know, and then as time goes on, you give away more and more and more, and now, you know, Springer Nature, they determine what is good science, and that is not a good thing. That's all I'm saying.
So, with that argument, was it, you were the president of Indian Academy of Science, was it a right decision on the part of the Indian Academy of Science to give their journal co-publishing rights to Springer, which only increased the cost to the community as a whole and helped a little bit in branding academy?
No, it has certainly, you know, like I said, you know, the association with Springer has been good for the visibility, all right, to some extent. Visibility can also be a bad thing when you are, you know, largely observed, when you're very, very visible to large groups of Chinese authors and Iranian authors and so on. I mean, that can also become a little bit of a problem, right? But it was a decision taken long before I was responsible for things. I mean, I continued with it, but I'm also aware of the tensions of doing things like this. I mean, a lot more money has to be invested. It can't just be done it can't be done on a shoestring budget anymore, and that's what Robert Maxwell realized. See, Maxwell the way in which he did his publishing empire, he did it like a business. And that, to some extent, is worth remembering.
I have comments to make. In fact, when we negotiate with the publishers, we came to know that Wiley, Elsevier, all of them the larger part is constituted by the society. So, for example, Wiley represent about 160 societies. And those societies are very tough in negotiating with the publisher as to how much they get. And what is surprising is that when Wiley offer their journals, many of these societies are not part of the bundle because they opt out. That if you, if they have to be included, they have to have a separate share. So, I would say that Academy was late in joining the publishers. Most of the societies are already publishing, co-publishing with the publisher. That is the case for Elsevier. For example, all this AICHE is a part of Elsevier.
The Academy was the first Indian society to join anybody.
Exactly.
Right? So it's the way in which we did it.
The word over trend is this, that they are already co-publishing with the big publishers.
Yeah. Actually, you see, the Academy makes a lot of money, not $1 million, but it makes enough for us. I think that we would be happier making less if Springer would also make less, except that we would make less and then Springer would just take the rest of it anyhow.
When we were discussing with some of these foreign people, libraries have country-specific budget they want to discuss. So I was making a presentation on what India publishes, about say 1400 journals that time in 2007 or even earlier. They said, where are those journals? They said, we are not able to spend our money on Indian publication because they are just not available. So, Springers make them available. They can spend their money on India collection now.
So are we done with the question answer session? Can I request Honorable VC Sir to come to the dais? We have one more. Yes, I request him. Okay. No, I just wanted to request you to sit on the dais. Okay, sir. So now I invite Professor Gautam Mandal for the presidential address. Over to you, sir. You can be there. It can be there.
Okay. Yeah, can you hear me? Okay, thanks for this opportunity to come here and be enthralled by my friend Ram's talk. I found it absolutely fascinating, and it's a subject which is very close to my heart, and I'll explain a little bit. Why it's so close to my heart is that this archive, was precisely born when I was at the Institute for Advanced Study. My postdoctoral colleague, Joanne Cohn, used to keep a list of email addresses. And it just grew, into a network of addresses. And anybody who wanted their papers to be, their preprints to be more widely known, they would send it all to Joanne. And Joanne would send the whole papers to other people in the list. So the list grew. And as a result, the number of submissions to Joanne also grew. And she was doing all that single-handedly, and it was, it was an amazing thing, except that this was the time when my PhD advisor, Smetna Wadia, also came to Princeton Institute for Advanced Study. And once he had gone out of station to Europe or something, and when he came back, he found that his area was completely clogged. Because those days, one had a very small quota of disk space, and Joanne Cohn's posts had basically clogged his disk space. So we were at Aspen, and he was complaining this to a bunch of people, and Paul Ginsberg listened to it, and he said that maybe a better idea for Joanne is to just email the abstracts and not the whole paper. And if then there was some request, the whole paper can be sent. But instead of that, Paul gave this problem and this idea to another friend of mine, who was Tanmay Bhattacharya, who was my PhD batchmate in TIFR, and Tanmay solved this problem. He was a technical wizard, and he set up this archive single-handedly. It was made all automated, so people would submit their papers to the archive, and the archives had some automated mailer, so they will, the next morning, every morning, they will send the abstracts, okay? And then soon enough, I think maybe right away, it was, the whole paper would also come if you click on some other link, okay? So it was all, and it is basically that model which is now used. It's now shifted to Cornell University. And the archive, as Ram said, it hosts some over 2 million articles or something. And I'll tell you some little bit more about, in my little area of research, that's theoretical high energy physics, many people do not publish anymore. I mean, I should say, many people do not publish a lot of their papers. Okay. And some of the most famous papers are from there. Okay. I have, one of my very well-cited papers is not published. It was never published. It was just sheer laziness. Okay. I wanted to make it better in some calculations. So it was just there. But people started, citing it, and it's one of the very well-cited papers. And there is another paper of mine which is not cited in any of the big four things. It was published. It was not published in some big league journal like that. It was published in MPLA, Modern Physics Letters A. Those days there was some sort of idealism that we will publish in Asian journals. So World Scientific Journal this was. And this is, in fact, my best cited paper. And this is not, I'm not saying just for me. This is a general trend that in this little area of scientists, we have basically gotten rid of this brand thing. Okay? It is possible here. Of course, it has taken time. So when I was a postdoc at the institute, that was 89 to 91. So we have come a long way. Now the archive has got this kind of a prestige that people are not sometimes publishing and in journals. And we are all getting directly these papers from the archive. In fact, the latest version of a paper is in the archive. Why is that so? Because after you publish it in a journal, you would like to make some more corrections. That you cannot do in the journal, but you can do that in a version 2, version 3, version 4. So if you want to really find out the latest version of some work, you should look at the archive. Okay. Now, of course, Ram made some very valid point about peer review. How does one take into account this question of peer review? By the way, there was another question, I think, from back there. I would recommend that, okay, there is a platform called ResearchGate. Okay, it's free. And, you can actually post your own published papers in that website. I get requests, every day, some number of requests that can I have your paper? Because from ResearchGate, they can get only the title. Okay. And then, I don't know how it is for many journals, but in all journals, but in some journals, you share the copyright with the publishers. So therefore, you are perfectly within your rights to post your published paper on ResearchGate. Okay, I do recommend this to people. That's a very useful thing to have. In any case, I started doing this after I got requests for full papers from people, So that's one thing that you can do. The other stuff is that peer review, of course, is important. But we are doing this anyway. Okay, I have been in all three roles: as an author, as a referee, and as an editor. We are doing all the work, as Ram said. Okay. So we are doing peer review anyway, so why not do peer review for the archive? Just get rid of the publishing companies. Let's form, a group of referees who would referee, peer archive papers, okay, and then put their comments on the same archive paper, in the same link as the peer review. Okay, let's, in fact, there's a blog by somebody I know very well. His name is Luboš Mottl. So he is from Harvard, and he runs a blog called the Reference Frame. Okay, he's a very smart gentleman. Okay, he left physics, went for the I think the education ministry in Czechoslovakia, or that's where he's from. Anyway, he runs this blog. So many people actually refer to his blog to figure out whether some archive submission, okay, is reliable or not. Of course, this is a one-man show. You may say that this is not the right way, but I'm saying that the better thing is that this entire family of reviewers, us, why don't you do it for the archive? Okay, then the peer review job is also done. Another thing is about the metrics, H-index, this, that, and whatnot. We can devalue the use of metrics, okay? But of course, it requires more effort. Again, from some very small cocoon of myself, that's TIFR, I can say that in TIFR, we are actively discouraged in committee meetings where promotions and selections are done. We are actively discouraged from using metrics like H-index and so on and so forth, okay? It's harder work, of course. You have to read the papers, okay? And you cannot read the papers in biology. In some bigger meetings where you are also supposed to opine on, physicists are supposed to opine on biology recruitments and so on and so forth. There we trust our biology colleagues. They will have read the papers and so on. So somebody is reading the papers instead of using the metrics. It's possible to do. I remember when I was in charge of the faculty in charge of the TIFR library, some Elsevier person, Dr. Prabhakaran is the librarian of TIFR, he's present here, he might know. So some guy from Elsevier, he came to sell us a metric, some new metric that Elsevier was trying to come up with. I told him very simply that, no, we don't want to buy your metric because we don't use metrics in TIFR. So it is possible. I'm all talking about very small spheres which I have been closely acquainted with, but presumably, it will grow, this kind of movement will grow, and we can have some, sort of reliable perpetuating thing alternative to Sci-Hub, which of course is a great thing. Sci-Hub is absolutely the fantastic stuff. All our students and the faculty, we all use it, okay? And even when I was faculty in charge of the library, I would use Sci-Hub. So anyway, this is, but once again, it's a fantastic talk, Ram. And I hope that from deliberations like this, some real movement starts, and that would be the big gain from such ideas. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We have some felicitations. So I request VC sir to please come on the dais. Sorry. So now I request VC sir to felicitate Professor Ramaswamy. There will be 2 mementos, one by Informatics, and this is from WWII University. This is by Informatics. Thank you so much. Now I request VC sir to felicitate Professor Gautam Mandal, the memento by WWII University. And by Informatics. Can we have the memento by Informatics? Thank you. Now Informatics takes pleasure to felicitate VC sir. So I request Satyanarayana sir to felicitate VC sir. And we request VC sir to accept as a token of our affection a felicitation from Department of Library Science. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Please have seats. Okay, for they're taking, I think, a group photo. Can we take it afterwards? Because, sir, we need you on dais because the small part is remaining. So I request Samantha ma'am to present vote of thanks. And then the group photo can be taken. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I hope I'll make this short. On behalf of Informatics, I would like to extend the vote of thanks for today's program. First and foremost, I would like to thank our VC, Professor Rajashekaran Pillai, for hosting the 18th annual lecture on informatics at Somaiya Vidyavihar University campus. I would also like to thank Professor Vaidande and his team who have been at the forefront of organizing this program. I would also like to thank Mr. Mahavir and team for the technology support in airing this event to our online audience. I would also like to extend my heartfelt thanks to Professor Ram Ramaswamy for delivering the annual lecture. Professor, you have brought out a very poignant picture of the uneven access to scholarly content, not just in India, but many underdeveloped and developing nations. You have, very nicely described the digital colonization that we are all suffering under the hands of the publishers. And you also brought out some very nice initiatives like Archive, EJDS, INASP in trying to make the scientific community more equitable. Unfortunately, as you say, the scholarly publishing these days has become more about scientific prestige and not about the relevance of what the content really makes to the world. The published content really makes to the world. There was definitely a lot of food for thought in your speech for the scholarly researchers and the community and the audience today, in today's times, for the dilemma that they face, ethical and moral dilemmas in wholeheartedly embracing open science. As you indicated, the cost benefits of publishing in OA journals have also been lost at the altar of vanity publishing. Also, OAs, as we all know, is encouraging a lot of predatory practices in journal publishing. You pertinently raise the importance of, sites like Sci-Hub, LibGen, in their role in providing equitable access to scientific scholarly content. Only time will tell how this case progresses and if it really is a formidable tool in transforming the Indian research landscape. I think in today's speech, a lot of research scholars will go back and sort of reevaluate for themselves their commitment to open science. And also there was a lot of food for thought for the institutions themselves to reevaluate their commitment to make science equitable for its researchers who come across, who come from this diverse nation of different kinds of access. And also there was a lot of food for thought for probably, if the bodies like UGC and accreditation bodies can take into consideration in making this ecosystem or in providing an ecosystem for open science to bloom. Thank you very much, sir, for your enthralling talk. I thank Professor Gautam Mandal for presiding over today's lecture. It's very nice to hear a personal account of Archive and its journey from you. And also, you had some very, this fascinating idea of peer reviewing of Archive or such repositories by the collective scientific community. I hope, there is more progress in this. Thank you very much, sir, for your precious advice. In the end, I would like to thank our wonderful audience for taking the discussions forward with their thought-provoking questions and comments. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night's sleep, and dinner has been organized, so we can all break for dinner. Thank you very much.